to our 10th webcast with Cooper Levenson attorneys Alexander Rigdon and Cynthia Grob. Lexi and Cynthia, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Awesome. So today we are catching up with you guys about the family law group at Cooper Levenson. So I'm just going to ask one question and I'd like you guys to talk about it. What is just one of your practice principles?
Well, it's good to see you guys, and we're kind of going back to the basics today without any special guests. They'll be back soon. One of the family department, and I know Cynthia shares this with me, our practice principles are, you have to tell it like it is to clients. You guys are paying us good money, and not everybody is wealthy. Most people are not wealthy going through this. And so you guys are not paying to have us tell you what you want to hear, but not give you the real truth. And sometimes that can be hard because in family law, there can be a lot of disappointments. Family law can be a tough area of law anyway. In most instances, going through a divorce, there's a lot of bad news coming at you. You might have court proceedings. You might have a not so great ruling from a judge. You might be settling on something that you don't necessarily like, or you might be taking a position that you think is reasonable, but your attorney doesn't think is reasonable. And it's our job to be not only sort of a friend throughout the process, but also to tell you what you don't want to hear. And that's not always easy for us either, but unfortunately it's an occupational hazard. It's part of the job. And obviously it just means that we care about our clients because we don't want to steer them wrong. So even if that means telling them the bad news and being upfront with them, that's part of our job. And
Yeah,
I know
and I think
too.
Yeah, and I think that something that kind of caters into that is our avid discussion of strategy, like always linking the strategy for how we want to direct clients to what the realistic costs of that strategy are so that people can make informed decisions about what avenues they want to pursue and coupling that with what the costs of choosing that path are.
Yeah, and it's hard dovetailing on that. Sometimes a client really feels a certain way about something. And although in my heart I might agree, we have to bring them back to reality and say, this isn't necessarily a reasonable position. And I'd be lying if I said everybody took that perfectly all the time. They don't, because everybody's human, us too. But to do our due diligence, Cynthia and I, we try to give it to you straight.
Yeah. So in terms of the the practice principle that I have pretty much since the beginning of the year really started to think about and embracing as something that Lexi and I discuss and we really think about in terms of our practice is the concept of optimism. And I know that kind of sounds a little funny when you're thinking about optimism in the context of a divorce, and a lot of people view divorce negatively. But I like to kind of try to reframe that paradigm and talk about divorce as not necessarily always looking at it as that there's a possibility of being happily divorced, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. A quote that I like to keep in mind is that like one hopeful person will accomplish more than 100 cynics. And the reason for that is that a hopeful person tries. They try to accomplish something different. They try to reach for a goal. And if we can keep people focused on the happy ending to their story or being a part of creating that happy ending for themselves, while it sounds kitschy, I think that it really, Lexi and I would like to be seen as happy divorce lawyers, people who focus on getting folks to their end story. That's their best self.
Yeah. And I know Cynthia shares this. I have seen people transform from the first time they come in to see me. They're crying, they're shell shocked, they're not keeping it together very well, to months or however long it takes to get to the divorce over. They're like a new person. They're excited for their new chapter, and they really have come a long way mentally. And I'm divorced, so I get that. And there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily going to be easy. But my favorite example is, Meghan Markle is divorced, and now forget about the fact that they parted ways with the royal family. She's a duchess. So things can work out pretty well in the end for people. And so it's important that while we're giving them straight legal advice and straight talk and helping them make the best decisions, that they do keep their eye on the fact and realize that there is light at the end of the tunnel when this is over, and hopefully a happier life ahead.
Right. And the one tool and the one thing that I think that a lot of our clients who get to that happy place or are able to find that spot do is they find a counselor that not only they use our services as attorneys, as confidants, but they also find a counselor for themselves to help them with their personal growth. And that also allows them an opportunity to have a sounding board that's not necessarily their attorney, which also in turn saves them some costs along the way.
Yeah.
But gets them a support system if they don't have one within their family. It gets an outsider that helps them keep perspective during the process.
Agreed.
So.
Well, I know that family law can be a lot of tough topics, and I think it's great that you guys shared some of your practice principles, and how you guys can be a beacon of light for people.
That's us.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that. It's so helpful, I think, for people to kind of hear that from you. And then I just would like to end on a more fun question, which is, what are you reading right now?
Lexi, you want to go first?
Sure. This doesn't really fit the theme of optimism, but I'm reading a book called Midnight in Chernobyl, which about the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, and it's impeccably thoroughly researched. It's like, I think it was a New York Times bestseller, so it's kind of mainstream for how depressing the topic is, but I mean, it's just very interesting, especially since we're living through a memorable world event now. It's just interesting to read about what those people went through all those years ago.
Okay. So mine is actually kind of funny because I am taking a pointer from someone that I was on a webcast with, and I have not started reading it yet, but I ordered on Amazon a book called Humankind, and it is the tagline for that is changing the world one small act at a time. And while that does neatly dovetail into our theory of practice, I just found that for myself, I wanted some guidance on how to stay positive and how to just kind of every day do a little something that makes builds my self-worth and myself and helps someone else. So.
Great. I am currently reading 2 books. I'm reading American Dirt, which is very interesting but very heavy. So before I go to bed, I like to read. I'm on right now Normal People, which is also a series on Hulu. So that I can fall asleep after. So I have 2 books right now. So that's kind of what I'm reading at this point.
Nice.
Well, thank you guys so much for hopping on and just telling us some of your guiding principles, and we really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
See you soon.
you.